Hello, everyone. Welcome to another segment of Black Op Radio. Today, we're delighted to have back researcher Lynn Mangan. Hello, Lynn.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Glad to have you back on. We got a lot of viewers, listeners to our last interview we did, and the month of June, I tried to discuss and bring up aspects of the Robert Kennedy assassination, which may have gone unnoticed, and I want to make more audio archives of information that's out there because it's so hard for people to find good information, and that's what Black Op Radio is about. So I'm delighted that you've come back on to discuss the topic further because we only had so much time last time, and I think it gave you a little bit of time to just to go over some of your notes and some of the things that you thought, here's a few things that we should really further discuss for people, researchers. And so why don't you take it from there?
Yes, of course. What you said is exactly what happened. There was just no way that I could cover all of the material that I wanted to cover. And even now, here with this, still it's a problem because it's so monumental. I mean, the evidence is just rotten at every turn. But, this latest work, this letter to Nancy Zimmerman, there are several things that I should have stressed. And, of course, I really don't, I'm not that organized, I'll say that, because I work alone. And my files are not in the best condition. But, for readers and listeners to understand what I'm trying to tell them, that, this is substitute false evidence, it's just a tissue of lies. The best way to begin is with something that I mentioned to you in this Appendix H. It's a list and description of trial exhibits which accompanied the Sirhan evidence when it was turned over to the California State Archives. And when I examined it, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were so many mistakes and so much, really false and misleading information that, I took notes and I thought, you know what, this really requires a lengthy and careful study. So I intended to get on with it, and I got sick, and so that postponed it until your telephone call, a week ago, and then as I was going over these notes, I thought, oh my God, I never did write up that report. So here's what the listener should try to understand. People's 55 is in fact what I call a Perry Mason moment. And I want to tell you why. I'm going to read it exactly as it is. And I'm talking about, again, Appendix H, List and Description of Trial Exhibits. And now we're going to look at page 2. And this is all on my website. Okay, it's listed under the letter F, 3906:62. And where it came from, of course, is the trial. And what it is People's 55, and this is what they write for a description of People's 55. Now pay attention because this is absolutely stunning. Okay, it says, I'm quoting, spent 22 caliber cartridges, and then in brackets the number 2, and then there's a semicolon, and then expended test bullets, and then in the brackets 3, the number 3. And then the last thing, the shell casings, and there are 2 of those. Okay, now, that is stunning, and I will tell you why. Because these spent 22 caliber cartridges, too, they don't exist anywhere. I mean, where do they come from? That is, as I wrote to Nancy Zimmerman, there is no way anyone can adequately explain that. No way, because they're bonus, non-existent cartridges. They probably existed somewhere, and they're hiding them, and they're put here in People's 55. People's 55, which was at the trial, legally, People's 55 in the trial is 3 expended test bullets. That's all. There's no mention of the 2 shell casings, and there certainly is no mention of these two additional spent 22 caliber cartridges. And if you look at the meaning of 22 caliber cartridges, you look at the bullets that were taken out of the victims. Okay, now we know that the Stroll bullet, even though it's a very odd-shaped bullet, it's described as spent 22 caliber cartridge taken from Erwin Stroll. The bullet removed from Ira Goldstein, spent 22 caliber cartridge taken from Ira Goldstein. And from Elizabeth Evans, they describe bullet fragments. And People's 54, the Wiesel bullet, which was nearly perfect, described as spent 22 caliber cartridge taken from William Wiesel. But now we look, and I went over this last week. People's 47, they describe it only as spent 22 caliber cartridge. No mention that it came from Kennedy's neck. And the bullet taken from his mastoid area, they describe as portion of court reporter's transcript and bullet fragments. That is absolutely false. Not only misleading, but false. That is unbelievable, because that's supposed to be the Kennedy fatal bullet and bullet fragments. But no, in the place of the Kennedy fatal bullet, they say portion of court reporter's transcript. Misleading and false, 100%. And they don't mention that Kennedy was the person that it was removed from. So that's really, really serious. You have two unaccounted for spent 22 caliber cartridges that appear in People's 55 and nowhere else except in this inventory. Now, I'll tell you what's interesting about this inventory. It's like a bookend. Do you remember the Patrick Garland evidence inventory? When I carefully examined that, I immediately saw that the Kennedy neck bullet and the Goldstein bullet and also the grand jury bullets, they were substituted. So that's one bookend. Here you have exhibits that are described, and they go to the archives, and they're also false. In fact, you can see my handwritten notations of my corrections. But then there is something else that I didn't get into before, and I will tell you what it is now. And it's listed as F3906:38. And it lists, the exhibit number is, from the trial, and it's People's 21. And how do they describe that? I'm talking about the official description. Spent 22 caliber cartridges, 8 of them. Absolutely, absolutely incorrect. Because People's 21 originally was Grand Jury 7A. Here's the problem. We are not talking about spent cartridges. People's 21, which is formerly Grand Jury 7A, were the shell casings that were allegedly removed from the Sirhan revolver, the crime scene revolver. But they were unmarked. Now, the person who placed that in evidence should have placed an identifying mark, even if he did so on the inside of the shell casings. So I believe that at one point that they were marked, but they were substituted. I can't prove it. But why else? Why else would you have bullets in an envelope with no gun number on the envelope? So how do you know where they came from? All that you have. Remember, we discussed it last week with Sirhan's DR number. So if you follow through to this inventory, you see that that same problematical Grand Jury 7A, which at the trial became People's 21, when it goes to the archives, it is falsely listed as spent 22 caliber cartridges, 8 in number. Absolutely false. They are supposed to be shell casings. And the only place, I will tell you something interesting about this, the only place that shell casings appear in this Appendix H inventory list is the 2 shell casings in People's 55. So if a person wanted to, just thinking, let me take a look, let me examine the shell casings, they wouldn't know that People's 21 are shell casings. They'd have no idea. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to. There's an awful lot of numbers, and
the 8 shell casings allegedly from the crime scene gun.
Right.
When they arrived at the California State Archives under People's 21, they are falsely listed spent .22 caliber cartridges. They are not. They are supposed to be shell casings from the crime scene gun. They're false. So I'm saying if a person, at some future date in the future, they wanted to looking at this, they're examining this evidence inventory, and my God, they'd never know. They'd never connect People's 21 with crime scene shell casings. Do you follow what I'm saying? Totally misrepresented. And so that is an enormous problem. But the biggest problem of all, and I know I'm really probably talking over people's heads on this, but People's 55 in this inventory list that accompanied the evidence to the California State Archives includes 2 spent cartridges, 3 expended test bullets, and 2 shell casings. Well, the 2 spent .22 caliber cartridges appear nowhere. How did they get here? Where did they come from? Where are they now? And then another question: where are the? And I asked Nancy Zimmerman in my letter, where are the missing test shell casings from the 75 examination? Because they're not listed here.
And Nancy Zimmerman, for people who don't know, is the archivist at the California State Archives.
Yes.
So she's in charge of making sure that they have what they're supposed to have. That's
right. And every time that I examined all of the full amount of evidence, they had an officer, California police officer there, and so he monitored. He made sure that the bullets were, and they would only bring out one exhibit at a time. That's another thing. So the California State Archives staff, they're doing their job. I am absolutely not blaming them in this problem of false evidence that they received, and I have proven it. And so the problem isn't there. They certainly didn't make up the inventory. It was handed to them, to accompany the evidence. But if we look at the history of People's 55, because now we see that they're stuck. They are really stuck with these 2 extra bullets. I mean, and they're what they call, very plainly, are spent .22 caliber cartridges. So that means it was fired from a gun. And according to how they describe the victim bullets, they're spent .22 caliber cartridges. So they were removed. They describe what was removed from the victims, Wiesel, Goldstein, and Stroll, as spent .22 caliber cartridges, which is precisely what these extra bullets are in People's 55 that appear nowhere else except in this inventory. I mean, this is really shocking. So now they've got a problem. I will tell you, Nancy Zimmerman really had nothing to do with this mess. But how does she answer this? I'm sure she's going to have to consult with some people who are still involved with SUS on how do we answer this? What do we do? Do you know, I wrote to her, there is no answer. Nobody can answer that. They were caught. They were absolutely caught with their hand in a cookie jar. These people gave them phony evidence, and nobody challenged it. Nobody questioned it. The same as the 75 examiners, in the Wenke hearing. They didn't question what they were given. They were given bullets, and they figured, so this is what it should be. That's not at all the case. They were substitutes. So if you look at People's 55, the way it came into evidence and what was it? Well, I'll just quickly review it. People's 55 is an evidence envelope of test firing for comparison bullets. And it has the Sirhan name on it, fired by Officer Wolfer, but it has an LAPD-owned gun number written on it, H18602, instead of the alleged Sirhan gun should be H53725. And I went over this before, but very quickly, the LAPD gun, they owned this gun because Jake Williams, who had been arrested, did not claim it when they let him go. So therefore, it became the legal property of the LAPD gun, and that is what that gun number is written on Sirhan evidence envelope People's 55. I know, I can hardly believe it. It's so so shocking that they would try to pull this off that, I have to keep myself from laughing. Anyway, so to get on to the two shell casings. Well, the shell casings are always a problem for me in this case because they were not in the envelope at the Sirhan trial when Officer Wolfer described the contents of People's 55. So the shell casings had been removed from the record in the Sirhan trial transcript. So if anyone read the Sirhan trial transcript, they don't describe at all, they don't mention any of the writing that's on that little envelope, but there were no shell casings that were included in the Sirhan trial transcript. They're not listed in the inventory. And then to cover all this up, right after the trial ended in May, and I think it was May the 19th, there was a secret meeting in Judge Loring's chambers, and Judge Walker, who was the trial judge, went, maybe it was across the hall, but he went into Judge Loring's chambers, not his own, where they had a special meeting on what to do with the evidence now that the trial is over. And you see, Sirhan had been convicted. Now what do we do with the evidence? Well, they had to cover that stuff up, so they issued a court order. But that's very strange. Why would it happen in Judge Loring's chambers and not Walker? And none of the defense was informed of this meeting. Absolutely, they were kept in ignorance. That is a true fact. And that's the reason that they could not enact that court order. Because if anybody was to challenge it, they would immediately see that it was a court order without the defense knowing about it, on that it would require a court order if you wanted to examine the evidence. And with the defense not knowing, they couldn't object. So wherever the evidence would be housed, as of that date, and I believe it was May the 19th, right after Sirhan was convicted, is when this order came about. The Judge Loring / Walker, Judge Walker court order. And of course it was never once acted on. Harper went in to examine the bullets. He didn't have a court order because they couldn't use it. They couldn't use it. They were afraid if somebody would challenge it, then this would tumble out, this business of trying to bury and keep in the dark. Just, in other words, to try to keep forever this stuff from any prying eyes. That is exactly what I believe was the purpose of the Judge Loring, Judge Walker meeting, that secret meeting. And it was a sub rosa meeting because the defense didn't know about it until after, 5 days later, when Judge Walker mentioned casually to Cooper, oh, you may want to examine that new court order. So it was the first time Cooper learned of it, and so we see that there was an effort to bury it because they thought, look, Sirhan really appeared guilty. There was no questions about it. But if some nut in the future, and in fact, in this Loring Walker transcript, and I once had a copy of that. It's now at the Lee Institute. Let's see, Fitz said cranks. That's the very word he used. Cranks. We'll charge them a lot of money, the cranks, to get copies, and they'll keep on cranking. So if anybody were to question the evidence, they were labeled as cranks, and they're going to, stick it to them, to charge them a lot of money to make copies. But that never happened. So Fitz, he became a judge shortly thereafter, and I know he had. There's no doubt in my mind that he would have none of implementing this. In other words, it was a waste of time, and they got caught. They got caught because they didn't dare exercise it, because it was illegal what they did. And so we see also, getting back to the shell casing, none of the shell casings from test-firing guns, H-52725 and H-18602, were included in either courtroom. Now, I want to tell you, I have to read that again and tell you why this is so important. Always the shell casings bothered me because we know that the barrel of the gun was badly leaded from a lot of firings after Sirhan, was convicted. People who wanted souvenir bullets. So So we know the barrel, it cannot be relied on for comparison test bullets. So now we look to shell casings. And this is what I discovered. None of the shell casings from test firing gun H53725 and H18602 were included in either courtroom. The People's 7A, the alleged test shell casings from the crime scene gun, they were not marked. So you do not know conclusively that they came from H53725. They were unmarked. H18602 gun, remember this is the LAPD gun that appeared on People's 55 envelope?
Right.
They were not in the People's 55 envelope at the trial. They were not listed in the Sirhan evidence. So you have a very serious problem of hiding shell casings. And then the 8 shell casings from the examiner's test firing in 1975, they are vanished. And I asked Nancy Zimmerman if she has any knowledge or anything to say about those missing, what can she add to the missing shell casings. They don't have them. They don't have, the California State Archives does not have the test shell casings from the test firing in 1975 in their possession. Is that unbelievable? And I point blank asked her, does she have anything to say about it, any explanation? And I'm not blaming her, but, you know, were they ever curious? Why didn't they receive shell casings? Do you see what a serious problem the shell casings are? Because you can't comparison test fire, you know, the bullet today. You can't do that. You know, H575. You can't do that because the gun is too fouled. You know, the barrel is too fouled. Well, if the barrel is so badly damaged that you can't, you know, have good test bullets for comparison, so then I think common sense tells you, let's look at the shell casings. Let's look at the pinstripe marking and of the gun if you fire it today with the pinstripe markings of the gun in evidence, of the shell casings in evidence. Do you follow what I'm saying? The only problem, again, is that the shell casings, in the very beginning, the crimes, the alleged crime scene shell casings, they are unmarked. And when they go to the California State Archives under People's 21, they are falsely identified as 8 spent .22 caliber cartridges. That is absolutely false. They are supposed to be shell casings. Do you see? This is absolutely stunning. How could they think to get away with
Lynn,
such a thing?
But you're saying those 8 are supposed to be from the crime scene.
That's right. That's right. People's 21, which was formerly Grand Jury 7A. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes.
And
then also, look at this. Remember, we're talking about 2 different. Here's what you have to remember. There were 2 different test firings on 2 different dates. June 5 with gun H53725, and I do believe Officer Melandres, because his name appears on that envelope. But it was not read into, none of this information was read into the grand jury at Sirhan hearing, because they did not give the gun number in the grand jury. I mean, they received the gun in evidence. They took possession of it, custody of it, but they didn't record the gun serial number. I mean, that's stunning. So that's with gun H53725. The following day, because that was on June 5, the following day, Wolfer test fires the police gun and puts People's 55 on it. Well, that was a court number. People's 55, but it doesn't have Sirhan's gun number. It has a police gun. And
the 602 gun.
H18602, you're right. So you had 2 different test firing dates, 1 day apart, with 2 different gun numbers. And each set of test bullets went to 2 different courts. H 53725 went to the grand jury on 6/7/68 and were not in evidence at the Sirhan trial. They were not there. Now, during the Sirhan trial, People's 55, that test firing, the 3 test bullets with 2 shell casings, but the 2 shell casings had been removed from the envelope during the trial. At the trial, the shell casings were not in that envelope. They were deliberately removed, and that was February 24th, 1969. So here you have like dueling test firings with 2 different guns, 2 different days, 2 different courtrooms, and no shell casings in either the grand jury or the Sirhan trial. I will repeat that. The evidence that went to the grand jury on June the 7th, 1968, has no test shell casings in the evidence envelope Grand Jury 5B. Isn't that hard to believe? You have 4 bullets in there, test bullets, from H5725, but no shell casings from that test firing. And now, and I learned absolutely, proof beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the test bullets in Grand Jury 5B were, in fact, substituted. Why? Because Wolfer stated under oath several times that he initialed all of his test bullets, and specifically the test bullets that went to the grand jury. But Garland's evidence inventory clearly states there are no identifying initials on the 4 test bullets from the grand jury. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? So they're substituted, no question, and that is from Patrick Garland's evidence inventory. It's very clear. I wrote about it. So we have...
well, let me interrupt you for a minute and just try to put things in perspective. Do you think that this gun that the police owned, the 602 gun, right?
Yes.
H18602.
Yes.
Do you think they were deliberately trying to take enough test shots from that one and slowly substitute so that there would be these guns, bullets, and shell casings in the evidence that people later on would have to just assume that must have been Sirhan's gun?
Well, you know what? I just couldn't speculate on that. But I do know that...
well, why would they take test firings from a gun that had nothing to do with the crime?
Well, that's a very good question. And I believe the reason for that is because what Wilford discovered very early on is none of the bullets matched, the victim bullets matched his test bullets from the gun that he was given. And we don't know what gun he was given because, remember, it had the wrong item number, 22. It should have been item number 11 that they handed him. And he did not write down in his log the serial number of the gun he was given. So we do not know. We know that from the evidence, from his log, he writes down that it's item number 22. And that is false. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well,
so
I hear that, but let's speculate for a minute.
Given.
I mean, the speculation would be that he's given the gun, he takes the test shots, he looks at them under a microscope, and he says, this gun does not match any of these bullets. There's going to be shit, like it's going to hit the fan, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
He says, look, I'll use this other gun, I'll test fire the bullets, I'll put them into evidence, and I'll give you a gun serial number, then it'll be 18602, and you can make these bullets match up to this gun, and there you go.
Well,
I mean, what other explanation would you give?
Well, that does seem like that's the case. I really do believe the gun he was given was H18602. That's my opinion. Because, they're going to go crazy with more guns in the case. So I believe he was given the gun that he wrote on the envelope was the gun he used, and that's the gun that I believe went to the grand jury.
Right, but do you think that's a gun that was in Sirhan's hand?
No. We'll never know. That's a phantom gun, destroyed. Who knows what happened to it? No, that's a substitute gun.
Right. We've gone over that. But then I'm trying to get an idea of what's going on here. So, in years from now, if they try to get the case opened, or if they're lucky enough to get it opened, when they're presented with this evidence, they can say, these bullets, it shows a colossal failure of the LAPD, and I just can't believe it can be that accidental.
Oh, none of this is accidental. None. No. I will tell you, I'm not, as you know, I'm not a ballistics expert, I'm not a criminalist, but I'm a very careful researcher, and I will tell you, I would never withhold evidence or give false, information. I just couldn't do it. And there was everything that I examined, and I tracked it down, I dogged everything down. No, this is false. All of the evidence is false. The guns are phony. I really, in my heart, I believe we will never know the gun that Sirhan had in his hand. We will never know it. And even if you looked at Rayford Johnson, what he wrote down in his diary, even that's a problem because it passed through several hands. Remember, Bill Barry, the retired FBI man who was in charge of security, Robert Kennedy hired him. He was the first one to reach the gun, allegedly, because I wasn't there. I don't have the stuff I really don't believe because so many lies, a pack of lies. But anyway, he puts the gun, remember I told about it, back on the steam table. Okay, now who picked it up from there? I don't know. But at one point, remember I talked about last week, Boris Yarrow, he had hold of the gun. He was worried that his fingerprints would be on it. And then it ends up in Rosie Greer's hands, and then Rayford Johnson, who took it to his home and wrote the gun number down. So the gun number that he wrote down, he didn't get that out of Sirhan's hand. It went through other hands. It went through Rosie Greer's hand, which, and I'm not, casting any, anything on Rosie Greer. He's a terrific guy. He was not involved in any of this trickery. But from Rosie Greer's hand before that, we have Boris Yarrow, and then we have the FBI man, Bill Barry. And so what gun was truly in Sirhan's hand is the question, I will tell you, can never be answered. That is a true fact. I think that gun was destroyed. It's absolutely gone. We'll never know. What we do have is fake. They're substitutes. And the record, they couldn't think fast enough. They're my God, they couldn't think fast enough because this evidence, if anybody takes the time to examine it, and the evidence is so false at every turn, there's nothing reliable, nothing accurate. And the only way they could get away with that crap is to meet in Judge Walker's chambers, remember, before Wolf would testify, where Fitz, one of the prosecuting attorneys, admits they don't have adequate foundation for the bullets, and it's our understanding that you'll stipulate to the bullets. And Cooper, who's in trouble with the law, oh yes, I'll stipulate, I'll roll over. Well, that's exactly what happened. Not one piece of evidence was proven up. Everything, including the gun, was stipulated into evidence. That is criminal. They knew in advance that they couldn't prove up the bullets, and they made a secret agreement. Sirhan didn't know about it. And I contacted Kaiser, Robert Blair Kaiser, asking if he knew about that secret meeting. Because, Kaiser, really a smart guy and so honest. He wouldn't have stood for it. Of course he didn't. He told me he was not informed of that secret meeting that took place where Cooper agreed to stipulate to the bullets. And Kaiser was their chief investigator. He was kept in the dark about that the bullets didn't have foundation. That's a fact. Kaiser is still alive. Call him up. That's what you ought to do. Call Kaiser up and ask him what he thinks of this evidence. I think that's a terrific idea. And another idea that I thought about, you remember I mentioned about that wouldn't be a bad idea if Pepper would have crime labs take a look at my work and write a report. Well, I was thinking, what would Harper have wanted? And I tell you, I know what Harper would have wanted because he championed that upcoming in 1978, the Congressional Investigative Committee. What I think the proper thing to do, this is what Harper would have done without a question, because this is what he wanted, is to have an expert crime, several, I don't know if I could trust one, several expert crime labs go over this stuff and write a report and send it to Congress. This is a terrible thing because the courts can't do anything. Even if they wanted to, what could they do? I mean, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. That's my opinion. And I know that this Judge Wistrich is, in my opinion, a very capable, very honest, a very good man. I think it's in good hands. But what can he do? This is way over his head. He doesn't have a clue, and about how bad this evidence is. If he did, I think he'd throw up his hands. What do you want me to do? What can I do? That's what I think the problem is with the courts today, because anybody who will examine this record of falsification of evidence that I have put together over all these years will see that it all comes from official documents, official records, and examining the bolts. I had experts come in. And also, look, when I wanted to have the DROS, the dealer record of sale for the gun, because there's a problem of what gun was in Sirhan's hands. All of a sudden, I mean, of all the things I have to destroy, that dealer record of sale, the triplicate copy of the gun supposedly that Sirhan owned. So what you have is in the California State Archives, you have a photostatic copy of dealer record of sale for H53725. Now, there's a problem with that, because when I carefully examined the copy, the photostatic copy at the archives, because I told you the original one was destroyed. It was at CII and then destroyed. So why would you destroy the original triplicate copy and keep safely under lock and key a photostatic copy? But all right, so I knew that I could never get an expert in there because they destroyed it.
But at any rate, we have the number. We have that record of 53725.
Yeah, that's right. But that is truly not Sirhan's gun. I truly, absolutely do not accept that to be Sirhan's gun. There's something very questionable about Hertz, Albert Leslie Hertz, the fellow who allegedly bought the gun. There's, I can't get into that. I really can't get into that, but there's something very wrong, because careful examination, and I took the time to closely examine that, and there's such strong evidence of whiteouts occurring on that document, on that sales receipt, whiteouts. So, all right, so if I suspect that it's a phony, so let me bring in experts, which is what I try to do. And so then I'm told that that little thin piece of paper had to be destroyed. It takes up so much room that it has to be destroyed. But what we're going to keep safely under lock and key is a photostatic copy at the archives. Give me a break. I wasn't born yesterday. This is a deliberate, continuing cover-up of anything having to do with gun H53725. I do not believe gun H53725 is truly Sirhan's gun. I really do not accept it. That's the reason I wanted I want to see for myself. And, I'm not an expert, so I was willing to bring in, an expert and let him examine it and write an impartial report. Can't do it. It's destroyed. What common sense, what can you tell me? What is the reason to destroy that thin little piece of paper? In a case like this, why would you destroy that? Here's a chance to prove it's really his gun. But you can't, because they burned it up, or who knows what they did with it. I mean, how much room does that piece of paper take? Why wasn't, if it was taking up so much room at CII, then why not deliver it to the California State Archives, where it won't take up so much room?
Well, we know that's not the case at all, right?
That's the point. In other words, there's an obstruction of justice at every damn turn that I took in this case. And frankly, it just makes me fed up. And they would have gotten away with it. If it wasn't for people like you with your program, Robert, people wouldn't even know about these things. It's because the press won't touch it. Nobody will come near it. And, Pepper and keeping it alive in the court, it's an impossible task. Impossible. Because Years ago, maybe the courts could have dismissed it out of hand and think, well, that's an end to it. But they can't today because too many people are asking questions. You know, you can't sell us that bill of goods anymore. Do you follow what I'm saying? So the courts, I think they were very, very aware that people are going to be looking over their shoulder. How are they going to answer this? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, and what I'm trying to figure out for someone like William Pepper or people further down the road is when they do get this evidence opened up, I think they're going to have to be able to have this knowledge already there that they are going to tell the court what's going on. If you're saying, here's the gun that Sirhan used, prove it. Prove it. Like,
right.
And where are the records that this is Sirhan's gun?
That's right. And that's right. Because I had such strong suspicions, such doubts, I wanted an expert to examine it, and then to be confronted with it being destroyed. I was in a state of shock. Well, of course, I didn't accept that. I knew it was you know why they had to do that? I'll tell you why. Because it would never hold up to examination. It would never pass. Right away, you'd have an expert saying this is a fake. It's tampered with. That is absolutely my feeling. So when that happened, I thought, well, sure, roadblock, you know. And especially for them, it was such an easy thing to do. Because I don't have, you know, Bill Harper, he was so highly respected, and he worked with, you know, he knew so many people connected to, you know, the field of criminalistics, that if he shouted, if he said something, then people listened. But if I say something, you know, I'm just a nobody, absolutely a nobody. Nobody would listen. So without Bill, you know, I have the internet and people like you, because I will state, you know, I'm not a fool. This is false evidence. I mean, I have proven it again and again and again. There's what the court will say is that now that I brought this Appendix H, you know, forward, thanks to your telephone call, because I totally put it aside. I was really ill, you know, for a couple of years, and I just totally dismissed this. I never got back to it. But what the importance of Appendix H that I just, you know, was referring to, list and descriptions of trial exhibits which accompanied the evidence that was given to the archives, it's absolutely false. And there is, and also so many misleading information that you can't rely on. That you don't know what they were given. There's no way because here this document that you're supposed to rely on, this inventory, is it's fraudulent. It's false. So what do you know that, you know, the archives see? How would you know what they received? No, I'm telling you, I really do think that the people who Nancy Zimmerman, I think she probably will, even though I addressed it to her, I wonder how she will handle it. I'm not putting her on the spot, but she is in charge of the evidence there, and now that she has knowledge of the inventory being falsified, what can she do about it? How does she respond? You know, it's a bad...
Well, you can't do anything. She can't do anything, I don't think.
No, she didn't cause it. She's not responsible. But now she has knowledge of, and I've proven it. I'm not just making an accusation. I pointed every single one out, you know, of the Sirhan evidence that is absolutely false. And then because I couldn't get into, you know, it's like an exercise without end, is what Lowell Bradford once told me, you know, examining this evidence. But I couldn't really get into the Wiesel bullet. I said that it was, you know, post-dated. But it's more than that. And I'll tell you, this Orozco, remember, he's the one who filled out the police property report for the Kennedy neck bullet, and he did not. There's a column, a separate column, for the identity of the, you know, of the evidence that you are submitting, that you're lodging with the LAPD. He did not record the ID marking TN31 that Dr. Thomas Noguchi inscribed on the base of the bullet. He didn't do that. But you know what's interesting? And we went over that before, so we don't know what bullet, was in Orozco's hand, because we have no way of knowing from this official LAPD property report, because it doesn't list a gun number. I mean, an ID number on the marking of that bullet. So then we look at the Wiesel bullet. Now, why is that important? Because remember I told you before that the Wiesel bullet is in near perfect condition. Why? Because it didn't strike a bone. It entered his abdomen. Remember, it had a soft landing, so that bullet is pristine. And that's the bullet that Harper used for comparison purposes, with the Kennedy bullet in his ballast scan camera
Right,
photograph.
okay.
Okay, the problem with the Wiesel bullet, here's a big problem. He post-dated his property report, this Orozco, this very same Orozco. But let's look at what Orozco did in the Wiesel bullet business. It passed through 7 different transactions, nurse to nurse to nurse. When the doctor took out the bullet from Wiesel's abdomen, why didn't he engrave? And we know he did, because a surgeon he has to do that. It's beginning of the chain of custody. He puts his initials on the bullet he removes, and so it went through from that doctor. I believe his name is Dr. Neal. It went through 7 hands into Orozco's hands. And this is a day later. It was removed on the 5th, and yet his report is written on the 6th. But it gets into, after 7 transactions, from, doctor to nurse to storage cabinet, then to Orozco. Orozco's initials are on the base of the Wiesel bullet. I have to repeat that. This LAPD officer, his initials, LMO, are inscribed on the base of the Wiesel bullet after previously passing through a number of hands. The total number of transactions was 7. And so then I asked, but where did he inscribe his initials? What location? Was it at the hospital? Was it the ramparts? Where physically did he put his initials on the base of the Wiesel bullet? And then you have to ask yourself, why would the bullet have gone through all of those hands, and why did he post-date it? So this is the very same Orozco who places the Kennedy neck bullet, the alleged Kennedy neck bullet, People's 47, in the police property report, but he does not list the ID marking that Dr. Noguchi engraved on, even though there's a column which requires you to do that. He leaves that blank. But what he writes in the text is the coroner case number. He's throwing sand in your face. So what did he do with Wiesel? What did he do with that bullet that it came into his hands from this previous six hands, 7 transactions all told, and he gets in his hands and he writes his initials on the base of the Wiesel bullet? Is that reasonable? Is it possible? No. There's a fraud there that is. So we don't know about the true identity of the Wiesel bullet. We don't know. How could we prove it? What are you going to prove with all those 7 transactions, unmarked in the hospital, 7 transactions? They're each one handing over to one nurse, to another, to a locked cabinet. All the time, it's an unmarked bullet. It reaches the hand of Orozco. He puts his initials on the base of that bullet. On what planet is this man living that he thinks anybody is going to swallow that? I will tell you that's fraudulent on Orozco's part. I don't know if he's still alive, but I will gladly have this man challenge me on this. I will gladly ask him, how is this possible? Where did you place your initials? Why your initials are not the surgeon's initials? Why an unmarked bullet going through all those 7 transactions till it reached your hands? And then it's post-dated. And I've proven it because the bullet was removed on the 5th and he post-dates his report on the 6th. Now, nobody has ever challenged that. But as I say, that always bothered me. So I wrote a report about it. And now when I come to this evidence inventory, that this Appendix H, I thought, how do they treat the Wiesel bullet? Well, they do attribute it to him, but and they give his name. But interestingly, about names, they don't give the name of Kennedy on the 2 bullets removed from Kennedy. They do on the victims; those names are given. I mean, if you look at that, if you compare, how are they treating the receipt of that evidence? They could give you the correct identity of what went to court, how it was identified, the victim bullets, and attach the name to it. But when it comes to Kennedy, absolutely. People's 48 is false. That's a fatal bullet. They write that up as a court record, and no Kennedy name appears. So you see, let's talk about a beginner who wants to examine the evidence, because by now I'm really experienced at it. I know the evidence, but we're talking about a beginner. It's overwhelming. There's so much, and it's so confusing. And then if you're trying diligently to examine this inventory, this Appendix H, that in my opinion is dynamite. You're trying to make head or tail, but you can't, because it's misleading and it's false, and there's no way you would have any knowledge that of what they're ascribing it to is absolutely non-existent. It's false. It's beyond misrepresentation. It's false, and that's the problem that I have with the evidence at the California State Archives, because if I'm relying on just this inventory, then what the California State Archives has is substitute evidence. In other words, what I think happened is that when they received the evidence, California State Archives, mind you, in 1988 is when I believe they received it, they received the false 1975 switched bullets. That's what I believe happened. So, but the California State Archives, they would have no way of knowing that. I mean, how would they be aware of that? They're just the recipient, of this evidence. But I do believe and nobody followed through on that. In fact, I never paid attention to it until I began researching this Appendix H. Is that people? Why would they question what's up at the archives? Why would they question that it would all be switched? But it can't be proven. That's the point. Why can't it be proven? Because the inventory, Appendix H, that I was examining is false, absolutely false, and misleading, misidentified. It won't hold up. There is no way. It's never thoroughly identified.
Well, if you were allowed to present this in court, it would be grounds for a mistrial.
Oh, absolutely. 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 But here's the problem. If you look at cases that are turned over, it's like cause célèbre. Even then, if you don't have an enormous amount of money and talent, and I'm not criticizing, Pepper and Dusek, I'm not criticizing them, but such dedication, such dogged dedications, and private, there are a number of colleges, law schools that are, getting into examining false convictions, and they're finding that many of them are being overturned. But that takes so much to an effort to get people behind it. To do why it hasn't happened in the Robert Kennedy case, I don't know, because we have the evidence. I mean, I didn't make up this stuff. This isn't, I'm not the bad person here. I didn't do it. I'm just offering up proof, documented proof of what I found, and the evidence is false. So what do you do?
One question I have for you about this idea of test firing a gun. I'm looking at something on your website that says it's a Los Angeles Police Department crime lab test shot, and they list the name as John Doe. Now, this is on June 5th.
That would be H53725, and Officer Melandres is on that. His name is written on it.
Right. Now,
That's
Why
right.
would they not? Are they saying this gun belonged to Sirhan or not?
Well, yes, that's exactly what they're saying, but there's a problem with that. And the problem with that is that the gun number was not read into the grand jury record. It is not in the grand jury transcript. So even if you say, all right, so it's a good bona fide envelope. No, because nothing was read into the record at the grand jury to authenticate that gun. How could you take a gun in evidence without recording its serial number in the record? That's why I tell you that's a bum deal. That H53725, I will not accept that for that very reason, because the grand jury was not given the gun number in the record.
But let me ask you this. But for argument's sake, say that the 725 is a gun. You know, the 602 gun, which seems to be cropping up everywhere now, is the one that you say they got from. The police just happened to have that gun.
Yes.
So where is
right.
the 53725 gun now?
That's okay. Now that's a really good question, because I examined that gun at the archives. You know what? You don't need a microscope. You don't even need a hand magnifier. You could see it. You could see it. H53725. There's the serial number. But here's my question, why I doubt it. I wonder if that gun has been retooled. I wonder, there's a SEM examination that Seal Laboratory did on the Caesar gun. I don't know if you're aware of that. But Caesar gun was marked Y13332. Now, in checking on that gun with CII, what was submitted to them for records checking was X13332. And that's false. So they submitted a wrong ID for the Caesar gun, and it came back, with no wants. But the gun H53725 in the archives should have undergone the same test as the Caesar gun underwent at Seal Laboratory in California. And that is a true fact, because I have a copy of that. It might even be, I think it's on my website, where remember Ted Chirac was involved with several people about making a film, and they tried to use the pantry, and Paul Schrade blocked it. And
I didn't know he blocked it. Why would he block it?
He blocked it. Let me tell you an interesting story about that. When I was sitting in his name, let's see, Carson, something in Jocelyn and Carson, John Jocelyn, that's who they were. John Jocelyn and Bo Carson were making a film, and they wanted to reconstruct the crime scene at in the pantry, and they kept asking for permission. They wanted to rent it, and finally, and they were always told no. And so finally, in demanding an answer why, they were told that Paul Schrade is blocking it. So I once did some research on a case, and I'm trying to interference with prospective advantage. Okay, I'll repeat that again. It's a California statute. Interference with prospective advantage. What that means, and it exempts real estate, by the way, if you're an attorney, that you're exempt from, being prosecuted on that. Okay, what that means is that if you are trying to earn a living and somebody is blocking you, then you have a right to sue them. They're blocking you from earning a living. So Paul Schrade, what was his position? Why was he actively blocking the use of the pantry that Jocelyn and Carson wanted to use in reconstructing the assassination? And so when I told Jocelyn about this law, that you can't do that, I said, and I told him exactly, where to find it, because I had done prior research on it, interference with prospective advantage, and that was what Paul Schrade had violated. And so I said, why don't you have your attorney write to him? So they did. So then guess what happened? So now Paul Schrade couldn't block it because he would be sued. He would be sued for preventing them from earning money. So what happened next? The whole thing was shut down because there was no further financing. So first they used to block Jocelyn and Carson on their film. I think it was called Tinker Toy. That's what Ted called it, Tinker Toy, Operation Tinker Toy. Getting the Caesar gun, from that Yoder fellow out in Arkansas. So when they couldn't block it, then all of a sudden, what shuts the whole thing down. But this is what I was told, that the financing dried up. And that's a true story. Were you aware of this? Did you hear about that?
No, not at all.
Yeah, that's an absolute fact. John, Jocelyn, and Bo Carson, and it showed. In fact, they had a number of pictures showing the big caterpillars. How they were, because it was nothing but a little pond where the gun had been thrown. And, they drained it, and then the caterpillars were moving the earth and what have you. But anyway, they did. They got the gun out of the pond, and they cleaned it up, and then took it to Steele Laboratory, where that scanning electron microscope, it has something to do with and I saw the photograph of it, where it's like an X-ray down into the gun to show whether the gun had ever been retooled, whether it had been renumbered, and their report was that it is the original number. Somewhere in my files I have that letter, and I got that from Ted Chirac. But that was never done to the Sirhan gun, the alleged Sirhan gun at the California State Archives. This is really important, my telling you this, because here we have a destruction of the dross, and we have the fact that the gun passed through so many hands, and that we cannot identify by test firing bullets. Today we couldn't do it because the gun is so badly fouled. And the test casings, we know, the shell casings from Grand Jury 7A and later became People's 21, they're unmarked. So the person who placed them in evidence in the custody of the LAPD Property Division, they are unmarked. So we don't know. There's no way of telling us absolutely that these are the shell casings. They came from a crime scene weapon because the shell casings are unmarked. And as far as the gun is concerned, again, that should be tested. I've always felt that gun should be tested. Steele Laboratory should be able, or any laboratory who can do, conduct that test, should bring their equipment in to have that gun tested to see if it has ever been retooled. So I'm telling you, these are all questions. Why? Because look, when I wanted to examine the dross, it was destroyed. Coincidence? Give me a break. What room does that take? So you can't prove it. You can't prove. Look at all the hands it passed through by the time it got to, the LAPD property. I have no idea. And then also here, look at the Baggett memo, which I put on last week. Okay, Harper found that the Wiesel bullet and the Sirhan, the Wiesel bullet and the Kennedy neck bullet did not match. The lands and grooves, the degree was off. Well, what they both said, because the LAPD then, remember, they called in Baggett to have him examine the ballast scan camera photographs, and he agreed that they were fired from two different guns, the Kennedy neck bullet and the Wiesel bullet. And further, this is interesting. The Kennedy neck bullet, the rifling on the Kennedy neck bullet was from a gun with sharper rifling, meaning it was a newer gun. Isn't that interesting? Really, I hope the people who are listening out there, because I included it in my last, the exhibits in my last report, that, the Baggett memo corroborates what Harper found, that the Kennedy neck bullet, the Kennedy neck bullet and the Wiesel bullet were fired from two different guns. And further, the Wiesel bullet probably was CCI, and the Kennedy neck bullet was from probably Federal or some other. That's what he wrote. In other words, it was not a mini-mag, which was, the Wiesel bullet. But then if you look at the mini-mags, look at my report, The Grand Hoax. That's a false, receipt for the mini-mags.
Well, for those not following us, you're talking about a type of...
Oh, mini-mag, these are the bullets that have, that sort of blow up on impact. They're hollow point, Cascade cartridge incorporated. They are the manufacturers of the mini-mag that was supposedly used in the Sirhan, firings. But what this fellow Baggett he writes is that the Kennedy neck bullet is probably, he writes, probably Federal or some other. So
bullet manufacturer.
That's right, bullet manufacturer. But then we look at the receipt that Sirhan had, bought the mini mags. Well, I have proven, that that's a phony made-up receipt, because of the sport arm, and that's all on my website. And then also, you look at, that Sirhan, he had bullets in his, I think there's no question a lot of this stuff was planted. What he was doing there, I can't account for what he was doing there, and his how much involved he was, knowingly or unknowingly with these people. But he had nothing to do with. He did not kill Robert Kennedy. There's no question about that. He didn't shoot him. Well, and as I said before, if he did, then why would all of this evidence be phony? Again and again and again, everything. There isn't a thing I touched to examine that. But there it was phony. It was substituted. It was false in your face. What is going on? Why was there a need for this cover-up? And they would have gotten away with it, but you know what? And I would never have been allowed to get near the stuff, near the evidence, if they thought that I could find anything, because, like I say, I have no scientific training, and they thought, I'm just somebody who Sirhan trusted, and I'd never find anything. Well, surprise, surprise, I am a good researcher. Otherwise, I really do believe that they would never have allowed me in a million years near the evidence if they thought there was a chance I'd find something. They figured I was a harmless, nobody. But, the evidence that I discovered is beyond a doubt, this is false. And how do we know it? Look, I didn't make it up, the Garland evidence inventory, and that's an inventory from 1975, and now we examine the inventory for the evidence that was given to the California State Archives, and that, too, is as phony as can be. So there really is no... You cannot prove anything up. And as far as the gun is concerned, I will never be satisfied unless I can see that that microscope, that scanning microscope that looks down into the metal of the gun, where the number is stamped, and you could see the one for the Caesar gun. That had never been tampered with, and that's what they wrote. That's a true number. That's the original number. But that has never been done with the gun that purported to be the Sirhan gun. I'd like to see that, and I will tell you, hell will freeze over before anybody will let you do that one. Isn't that interesting? I've never written about that, but that has always bothered me. That test should have been performed. How much does it cost? Then you'll know if that gun, if that's the true number, H53725, because after all, that's what's on that Melandres, June the 5th test firing date. Remember, with
right.
H53725. So why wouldn't they have done that? why would they go to the trouble and perform that test on the Caesar gun and not on the gun at the archives? That doesn't make sense. And then, like I said,
well, what year did they do that? Did they do that after they found the gun in the swamp?
Yes, and I'll tell you exactly when, because that was, let me see, that was about 1994. I believe that is the date.
And actually, Lynn, can you just back up for listeners who are not familiar with that Thane had the gun? Can you just talk about it from after June 1968, where that gun was?
Okay. He said, and I read that, he said that he bought the gun for his wife's protection. Remember, and I think I told you I held that gun. It had a pearl-like handle, really a very good-looking gun. So that's what he allegedly bought it for. And then when he was questioned about it, he said that he sold the gun 3 months before the assassination. Well, this Ted Chirac, brilliant research, brilliant. He tracked down who he sold the gun to, this Jim Yoder in Arkansas, tracked him down and got a Xerox copy of the sales receipt, which is clearly, I believe it's September. And so that's 3 months after the assassination. Yet, Caesar said he sold the gun 3 months before the assassination. That gun holds 9 bullets. And when people were being questioned, witnesses were being questioned in the Sirhan trial, I believe both of them, both Cooper, Defense Attorney Cooper, and Parsons, they talked about 9 bullets. Fire the gun 9 times. Well, Sirhan's gun only holds 8, so they're describing the Caesar gun. I'm telling you, that's in my report somewhere. But the fact is that Cooper, by repeating that several times, fire the gun 9 times, 9 shots. No, Sirhan's gun holds 8. And I'll tell you another thing about the guns. One thing that Harper told me was really interesting. He said this was a big, enterprise. Very, very careful. And what they would do is to have several guns at the crime scene, all of the very same make and model, all using the very same ammunition. That is exactly what Harper told me. Now, what if the gun that was used in the pantry was really an H&R, Harrington and Richardson, the 9-shot, which is what both Parsons and Cooper were describing in the courtroom when they said fire it, 9 times, and Sirhan's gun, hey, and I think that's where everybody is fooled. This is only what I'm very, very suspicious about, that the gun that Sirhan that was fired in the pantry was a Harrington and Richardson. That's what I believe is the problem, and not the Ivor Johnson. So, but I have no way of proving that. I can only tell you that this is all very, very suspicious. That Cooper and Parsons both, in reenacting, firing the gun. Why would they talk about 9 shots, fire it 9 times? Why 9 and not 8? There's something. That's an area of my research that is unfinished and can never be finished, because I don't have the clout, I don't have the congressional authority to go in with that equipment and test that gun to see if the serial number has been tampered with. I don't have that ability to do that. All I have is discussed that the dross was destroyed. And so that would help me out, but I can't do that because you cannot examine a photostatic copy.
Okay, but back to the Thane Eugene Caesar gun. What year was it thrown in the swamp?
I don't know. I'd have to check. But Yoder said that a couple of young boys broke into his house. This is what I recall from Ted telling me, that a couple of young teenagers broke into the house and stole the gun, and somehow got scared of what they did and threw it in the pond because they were questioned. And these were not bad kids, I guess. They just screwed up that one time. But anyway, that's That's the explanation. And so when an inquiry was made about the provenance of that gun to, CII, they gave the wrong number. What was submitted to CII about the Caesar gun was X13332, and it came back no ones. But that is not the number of the Caesar gun. So why was false information fed to the person requesting, the provenance for this, wants for the Yoder gun, for the Caesar gun, which then was sold to Yoder? I don't know why. That has always bothered me. Why not give the real serial number to CII? See, so that has always bothered me.
Right. The rumor was that Caesar had moved to the Philippines, and that gun was sold, and it was back in America somewhere. And now tell me about these guys who were going to make a documentary, and they had the swamp drained.
Okay. Yes, that was Jocelyn and Carson. Ted, I will tell you something very strange. In private, I will tell you, not on the air, but because I trust you, but I will tell you something very confidential that Ted told me about that. And as I say, I cannot, talk about it because I can't prove it. But it's something Ted said. And so we will talk off air. And that has always bothered me about that whole filming. Is something very rotten. And like I say, who is this? Where does he get the clout or the authority to shut down, to not allow Jocelyn Carson to film the pantry? How does? First of all, why would he block them? I just don't. I tell you, that is rotten. And,
but at any rate, they did find the gun in the mud, like you say, and they had it cleaned.
Yes, and it came out beautiful, really. And they took it up to after they Seal Laboratory did their test that was the true serial number, which, as I say, I repeat again, was never done to the Sirhan gun, the alleged Sirhan gun. Okay, then they took the gun up to Lowell Bradford, and Bradford tested that gun. He test fired it, and so I told Ted that I had some very good photographs of the People's 21 shell casing for the pinstripe marking, and I made a deal with him. I said, I will give you, now it's on my website, but at the time, I had no website. I had no knowledge of the computer. Anyway, so I told Ted that if you send me a copy, send me a shell casing from the test firing of the Caesar gun, I will give you this photograph of the shell casing in 7A, which became People's 21, and from the alleged Sirhan gun. So Ted sent me the shell casing, and it absolutely differed from People's 21 shell casing, and that's the fact. And that shell casing is at the Lee Institute, the Caesar from when Lowell Bradford test fired the Jake Williams gun. Oh, excuse me, not the Jake Williams, the Caesar gun. When Ted brought the Caesar gun up to Lowell Bradford in the 90s, the mid-90s, Lowell Bradford test fired it. He had his own lab. He had his own water recovery tank. And so he test fired it. And of the shell casings, I think they were, because remember there were 9 in that. Ted sent me one, and it did not match in any way. The pinstripe marking on the Caesar gun did not match People's 21 at all. I was just curious because what Ted was trying to find out if it was the Caesar gun that was used, in the pantry. And I said, no, I really don't think it is. So I said, why don't you check the shell casings? Because sure, you're going to look at the test bullets, but also don't ignore the shell casings. So I said, why don't we compare it with 7A, Grand Jury 7A, also, which is People's 21. And so it didn't match. But yes, Lowell Bradford did test fire the Caesar gun in the mid '90s. Yeah, that happened, and as I say, the SEAL laboratory, they did that special test to see if that had been renumbered, and it was the original number on the Caesar gun. And I say, if ever in my wildest dreams, if ever it happened, that they would think to test the gun up at the California State Archives, I would like to see that same test performed on the gun at the archives. It'll never happen. They'll never allow it. Just the same way that they wouldn't allow that I could not have an expert examine the original sales receipt, the dross, for the gun.
Now, I thought that I had heard that Caesar said he returned fire.
Yes, that I can't prove, but that he was that he did fire the gun. Yes, absolutely. That I definitely did read, that he returned fire. But then, so there was a question, well, could he have accidentally shot Kennedy? Of course, no. So, but
right.
Caesar,
but the only other thing is, you would think that if they did take that gun from the swamp, test fire, if there was some bullet somewhere in the pantry, it should match something.
Well, it wasn't the Caesar gun, and I really do not believe it was H53725, and I do not believe it was H18602. I think that gun is buried, destroyed, whatever, dismantled. It's deep in the ocean. It's gone. There's no way of resurrecting the true gun. They're careful. These were not amateurs who did this. They knew what they were doing. No, that gun is gone. And Sirhan was a patsy, and the gun was a patsy, and the bullets are a patsy. The whole business is rotten. And if people doubt what I'm saying, as I say, just take a look at my research. It's massive, but there it is. It's thoroughly documented. It's
now when people look at your website, it's kind of a little intimidating. Where would you start from a starting point?
Good question. I think probably 4, and let me see if I can find exactly which one. Maybe it's plain torque 4 or part 4. Let me see if I can find that real quick, because that one, I think that was done about 5 years ago, or a little bit more, and that's sort of an introductory. And I'm trying to remember exactly where. Let me see if I can find that, because that one, it's way down, because what happens is my newest entries are up on top. Let's see if I can find that. It has the number 4. The reason that this is such an intimidating thing to go through, because I kept thinking, I won't write anymore. I'm finished. With each report, I thought, well, that's really it. I don't need to do this. I don't know if anybody's paying attention. And then I kept right on. I can't leave this out. I got to add this, and that's what happened. So let's see. I think it is. Yeah, right now it's part 4, 40th anniversary update. Let's see, June the 4th. Let's see if that's it. And if that is it, then let me just go to that and see, because that would be a place to start. That is it, yeah. Okay. Part 4. Part
Good advice.
4.
Good advice.
Yeah, and that's because I say 40 years have passed since the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. I want to share some of what I have learned as a result of my painstaking research. And then is when I get into the Sirhan trial transcript, page 3967, that secret agreement. And,
right. Right. Well, people can go through this. It's a lot to handle for the uninitiated. But
yeah, it is.
I think, summarizing from our last interview, that you don't believe Sirhan fired any real bullets. You're under the impression he may have had blanks in his gun. You think there may have been another someone dressed as a security guard, not saying Eugene Caesar, as an actual assassin.
Yes, I
if
really
not
do.
more.
That's a possibility.
Highly organized, not like a lucky shot from some disgruntled anti-Kennedy fan.
Professional,
Yeah,
professional hitmen, yes.
professional with planning, possibly weeks in the planning.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I think when Sirhan was involved in these hypnosis sessions, I think he was recruited, for so they would have these throwaway people, these expendables that they would use, for disruptions or political rabble rousers or who knows. Because at that time, truly, this Kennedy thing was not in the works, because he hadn't decided to run. But when he decided to run is, I think, when they began to put their heads together. And Sirhan made a great candidate because he's Middle Eastern and the Phantom Jet business. And I have to tell you, he really was a perfect candidate for Patsy. Because who's going to question anything? This is a no-good bum as far as, the public would be concerned.
How enigmatic can you get? His Sirhan Sirhan. His first name is his last name. I don't get it. And then,
I know. Isn't that odd? So I think when he was recruited initially, and I think there are a lot of these people in America, and I'm not far out on this, because people do know that we did have these experimental programs. Remember this fellow Olson was killed, you remember, with the LSD business?
Yeah, that's a long time ago, though, but I'm sure that...
But what I'm saying is that we have these people that are out there, they're ready-made, tailor-made, ready to go for whatever use. I really do think that they're out there. Yeah, I really do. There's something, and I'm not far out. After all, we were deeply involved in investigating that sort of thing. And so I don't know if they're still doing it today, but I do know those experiments did go on then.
Yeah, well, just look at James Earl Ray,
Exactly. But
And then Lee Oswald, the supposed defector to Russia, that he comes back from the State Department.
Right.
I mean, and then he's, handled. All these people have handlers, and unfortunately, they just don't know it.
And you know what's so interesting? That there would be no trials. Remember Sirhan? Remember with James Earl Ray? No trial. In Sirhan's case, there was to be no trial. And the reason they got Sirhan to go along with as they plead guilty, and there would be no death sentence. Mary told me this, and I found evidence of it, and it's on my website. I don't know exactly where, but it's there. That Sirhan was to be, in the future, he would be a prisoner exchange. And I think, are you aware of that?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And in fact, that's in the records, in the SUS records. And because you'd see, Mary had told me that. And sure enough, when I was examining the records, there it was, that the Jordanian king, Hussein, he came to talk at the United Nations at the very time when they promised Sirhan. Well, you see, we have this prisoner. This is what Mary told me, that Sirhan was told there would be a prisoner exchange, and so he just go along, plead guilty, go along, and because we don't want trouble in the Middle East, and you are a good bargaining chip, go along with it. Look, Sirhan is alive. He will corroborate what I'm telling you, aside from the fact that it is in SUS. So he had the insurance that he would be exchanged in a prisoner exchange program. Well, they went to they had two separate secret meetings in the judge's chambers for the plea deal. But then we know it wasn't so secret anymore because this Berman, one of the co-counsels, he leaked it to the Eastern press, and it was in the headlines that Sirhan, the plea talk, he's willing to plead guilty. So, but Sirhan, the reason he did that, according to Mary, I wasn't present, was that Sirhan was assured that there would be a prisoner exchange for him. And additionally, there was to be something else. Additionally, there was to be some money, and that I do have proof of. That I do, yeah. So now we're getting into something I never went into before. But what's on my website, and I don't know exactly where, but it's there because it was printed in the newspaper, and Mary corroborated it to me that there was talk of a prisoner exchange. This was given to Sirhan in addition to a bank account. Now that I can back up the bank account. I've never made that public until I know I've never made that public. But I tell you, there are several people who know about that. Sirhan, for one, he knows about it, and there are several other people who know about that, about the bank account. And I don't know how much Munir would be willing to share on the prisoner exchange. I don't know, because I think Munir just does not want to get into my research. He doesn't want to go near it because he has his own thing around his neck, albatross around his neck. Remember buying the gun, and he was an alien, and he was ordered deported. So
that's
so
a brother.
That's right. So I can tell you that whole family is running. Well, there's only Munir left, in the immediate family, and frankly, what does he have to gain? He and I would never work together. Could never work together. It's so out of the question. But and so I don't know if Munir would be willing to talk about these things. But about the prisoner exchange, I did write that. Mary did tell me, and I found newspaper articles that corroborated. After all, King Hussein did come to the United States. He was talking before the United Nations, and the one of the reasons was that he was here to approve of it, because Sirhan would then move to Jordan, and that was what they told Sirhan. Now, this is what Mary told me. Now, whether Sirhan would be willing to talk about that and corroborate this, I have no way of knowing. Sirhan and I no longer, work together. I'm totally out of it with, the Sirhan camp. But that is a true fact. Sirhan was offered, if he would do a plea deal, if he would agree to the plea deal, he will have a prisoner exchange. And he was tired. And according to Cooper, and I have to find that, it's in the transcript, that the usual time served for, killing somebody is maybe 7 years good behavior. And the person might expect that. So that would be the furthest, on the time served. But Sirhan truly waited and waited and waited, and he just, frankly, got tired of of what he was promised, because look, what would he have gained in the plea bargain if he would get this death sentence anyway? And this is what Cooper ultimately he caved in. He says no problem with the death sentence. I mean, so what kind of a plea bargain is that unless you take the death sentence off the table, which Cooper didn't do? This is a really bad business because of secret deals and secret meetings. But Mary absolutely 100% did tell me that if Sirhan agreed to a plea deal, a guilty plea deal, he would have a prisoner exchange. He would be exchanged. Yes, that is what Mary told me. So, and then, as I say, in researching SUS, there I found corroborating evidence about a plea deal, that there was talk of a plea deal, and the fact that King Hussein came to America was to agree that he would be accepted in Jordan. So that's an interesting, very interesting terrain. So how high up did that thing go, that Sirhan could be told such a thing, and that he could fall for it? He was making a pact with the devil, and why would he? There's so much more to this, but I don't know if it'll ever be looked into. That I don't know, and I don't know if Sirhan would ever talk about it, about the prisoner exchange that he was promised. Mary never lied to me.
Well,
So
you never know. I mean, people going to university, taking a course, and they decide to reopen a cold case, like they have
yes,
done in Texas and that, or a law department
yes,
court.
yes, yes,
They may
yes,
want to look into this and discover some of these things that are not widely known, and they'll find out
yes,
about it here.
yes. I cannot agree with you more. But I think because I think we've discussed as much as we could. But I think the biggest thing that a person should look at is this appendix H. As I say, because here they attribute extra bullets. Extra bullets. Where did they come from? I mean, this is phenomenal. Spent 22 caliber cartridges too, and they're included in People's 55. That is absolutely 100% not in any other file. It is non-existent. It isn't in the Sirhan trial. I've never seen that before, except for this one page 2 of the Appendix H exhibits. So and that's what I asked Nancy, where are these two spent 22 caliber cartridges? Where are they today? Where'd they come from? To me, that's dynamite, because that has, an LAPD gun on that envelope. And now you have 2 extra fired bullets. In other words, you have 5 bullets in that envelope and 2 shell casings. 5 bullets, 2 expended test bullets, remember, from test firing H18602, and then 2 spent cartridges, which tells you that they were not test bullets, but they were fired bullets. So where'd they come from? Where are they now? Of all of the interviews that I've given, this one single question that I have now asked about People's 55, that F3906:62, People's 55, the 2 22 caliber spent cartridges, and the expended test bullets, total 5 bullets in People's 55. Never have I seen that anywhere else. So where are these 2 extra spent 22 caliber cartridges? That's interesting. That to me is one of the biggest problems, because there is no way, and I wrote that to Nancy, there's no way anybody can answer that. There's no way. I don't care how fast you think on your feet, how clever. No, there is no answer to that question. Where did these 2 extra bullets come from, spent bullets, and where are they now? That, my dear, is what will stop them cold. There is no answer to that. They can't. Usually you have an answer to try to cover it up. There is none. How do you justify that false evidence inventory, that Appendix H? How do they respond to that question? As I say, I'm awaiting Nancy's. She didn't do it, but I wonder who she's going to confer with about that one big question. If I had to wrap all of it up to one big question, it would be the evidence inventory in the Appendix H for People's 55. That is unanswerable. They're caught. They're caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Who was they? SUS. Not the
Special Unit Senator.
That's right. You're right. Special Unit Senator. Their hands are in the cookie jar on this one. I will tell you, because this is an official inventory of the evidence that accompanied the Sirhan exhibits to the California State Archives, and dead wrong on People's 55. What is their explanation? I tell you, I will wait till hell freezes over. There is no explanation. They cannot give one. They cannot justify that false information. I hope you realize what I'm saying, of all of the research, of all of the work, what your phone call, and I turned back to this, I thought, my God, how bold can they be? Just as we see, the Patrick Garland evidence inventory in 1975 proved, that it was a hoax. The bullets were switched. And here we see the evidence given to the California State Archives. I do believe they are the same switched bullets from 1975. But now we have 2 extra bullets in people's 55 envelope with the police gun on the envelope. That, my dear, is a big, big problem in this case. What to do about that? I will tell you, there is no answer. No matter how they twist and turn in the wind, there is no answer for those 2 extra bullets in people's 55. It's
well,
not
like you
possible.
mentioned, it's blatant. It's just blatant that they've been tampering with evidence.
That's it. Yeah. It is. And it was never meant for anybody to conduct a serious examination because of the misidentifications. You see, things aren't properly identified. Like, for instance, look at how they identified People's 21. They absolutely, they describe that as, let me get to it here. People's 21 is described as cartridges. I believe it's spent. I'm going to get, it's so important that I want to be very exacting. Here it is. Spent 22 caliber cartridges, 8. And that is not true. They are test shell casings, unmarked test shell casings.
Yeah, you would have thought from a crime scene they would have been marked with the initials.
And they should have been. I'd like to know what crime lab would accept that you receive in evidence unmarked unmarked crime scene shell casings. And what I had read, I began to examine, the FBI crime lab, how they treat shell casings, what have you. And if there's a thought or a possibility of damaging the evidence, then you would put your engraving on the inside of the shell casing. You see, so that you don't disturb any other identifying markings on the outside of the shell casing. It's
exactly.
historical. So you would engrave it on the inside because it's an open shell casing. So you'd inscribe it, the identifying mark on the inside. That can be done, and that would be done. But in this case, it's not on the inside. It's not on the outside. My son and I examined the shell casings. No ID marking. And also, this is what we are told in the LAPD property report, that the 8 shell casings, which became People's 21, they were not marked for ID purposes, as they did not want to destroy evidence. So then put your engraving on the inside of the shell casing. Do you see what I'm saying? They are unmarked shell casings, unprovable. And then the evidence envelope that they were in does not record the serial number of the gun they were removed from, does not record the officer's name, nor his badge number. All that is there, remember I talked about last week, all that is there is Sirhan's DR number. Not Sirhan's name, his DR number. So that's all there is. Sirhan's DR number, and these are and it's written in red ink.
And the DR stands for?
The DR. Remember, okay, it's a district report and daily report. District report or daily report. This is what I was told. So the DR number would be Sirhan's very early identification number of anything linking Sirhan to evidence. The DR number. And that's the only identifying information on the evidence envelope, and that's written in red ink. Doesn't give the gun number of the serial number of the gun that they were removed from, doesn't give the officer's name or his badge number. Do you follow what I'm saying? In other words, all you have is a DR number on an envelope containing 8 unmarked shell casings, which reportedly came from the crime scene weapon. And then you have no way of proving the actual crime scene weapon. Look at how many hands it went to. And of course, Rafer, Rafer's diary. What did he write in his diary? Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
But so far he has not, he absolutely has not. And nobody has, when Larry wrote to Rafer, and he asked him for information, the identifying marking, and that he wrote in his diary, he didn't answer. He did not respond to Larry's letter. Because I told Larry, we really ought to put him on the spot, have him respond to you. But he didn't. How could he respond? he didn't deny that he told me he took the gun home and wrote it in his diary, because he can't deny it, because he in fact did that. Why would he have lied to me? He didn't. He took it home. So what gun number did he write? I don't know if he wrote. He said he wrote the gun number in his diary. That's what he said. So what exactly did he write in his diary is my big question. And then, as I say, I'd like to see a laboratory or some other examine with their equipment if that gun number has been tampered with. You know, because people do that. They grind off the number, and I don't know how they put. You know, I'm not a gun expert.
Yeah, but they would stamp a new number in. Yeah.
But the fact is that Jocelyn and Carson, at their own expense, did have that test performed on the Caesar gun. That is an absolute fact. Now, why wasn't that same test performed on the gun at the archives? Because, look, when I tried going through the back door by looking, you know, at the dross, that's destroyed. So how do I prove up what, you know, the provenance of that gun? Now, I do not believe H-537 is Sirhan's gun. And certainly I do not believe H-18602 is Sirhan's gun. I don't know what gun. And there's
well, if they've
another
gone
thing.
to this effort, you can assume that they would have destroyed the real gun.
That's what the conclusion I came to, that we will never know what gun it's been destroyed, taken apart, thrown in the ocean, who knows. But why would anybody in their right mind keep a murder weapon around? Especially, you know, the man was assassinated, for God's sake. You know, that was a cover-up. And you can see it was a cover-up because they put a gun in evidence with the grand jury, and you're telling me that they don't record a serial number of the gun they took in custody?
Yeah.
Now stop and think about that question. Why? Oh, we left out something. Speaking of the gun, in this Appendix H, they list People's Exhibit 6, but they don't give a gun number. Take a look at it. I believe it's on, let's see, I think it's on page 4.
Well, I'm going to urge people to go through your website and go through it all.
But also just examine page 4 of that Appendix H, and you'll see the Sirhan gun. Let's see, they don't give the serial number. That's the shocker. People 6. Okay, it's F3906:152, and it's People 6. It just says Sirhan's gun. Sirhan's gun. That's it. It doesn't give you a serial number for the gun. So, that, you know what? You mentioned about law schools, you know, cold cases that they examine. They really ought to examine the stuff that I have. It's pretty extraordinary, but this inventory that we're just going over, how special this is, this Appendix H, how special, because it is an inventory of the evidence accompanying, you know, the Sirhan evidence given to the archives, and it's absolutely rotten. So, you know, at least something should be right in it, but it isn't. It's a mess. So really and truly, if we can get, you know, some law schools to take a look at this, they would really scream. I'm telling you, and I wrote that before, they would scream bloody murder. Who's going to allow this sort of thing to happen, especially in a case of this importance? But they never dreamed anybody would be asking questions, because Sirhan, it was never meant to be a trial. Remember the plea talk?
Yeah.
But the judge wanted his place in history. So the judge turned it down one day. They come back the next day or the day after, and again on bended knee before the judge. We want a plea bargain. And who was present? Well, the 3 prosecuting attorneys, the 3 defense attorneys, the attorney general, what's his name? Begins with a Y, I think, and in the judge's chambers. That's it. And Sirhan, of course. The court reporter was not allowed there because that proceeding was never recorded. No transcript was made of that. That was ultra secret. But we know what happened because Berman leaked it to the press, and that was in the paper. Sirhan, the plea talk. Pleads willing to make a plea deal. Plead guilty. So that's a most extraordinary thing. I'm trying to think of that district attorney's name. Or was he Attorney General? His name, I think, begins with a Y. It's been so many years since I've looked that up. But Bill Harper knew him personally, and in fact, they had a good deal of discussion about that secret meeting. But anyway, yes, your listeners would want to, because this is really important. It's part of our election process. If they would take the time to just examine, just semi-reports, it's really pretty bad. It's a bad record. How could these things have happened? Like in your face, in courtrooms, how does this sort of thing happen? So that's
behind closed doors. Just people don't know about it.
Yeah, and as I say, we should think of what Harper wanted.
And even when Thomas Noguchi made it public that that it couldn't have been Sirhan. What else do you do?
That's right.
I mean,
right.
But for those that are interested, they can hear this interview and reflect on your website and research work.
I think it needs to be done. We need help because after all, this is one of the things that we demand. We demand justice. This sort of thing can't happen in our courtrooms. It can't be allowed to happen. And, if there was, a few innocent mistakes, you write it off, an innocent mistake. But these aren't. These are deliberate frauds. This is a deliberate substitution of evidence, and it's destruction of evidence. Look at the ceiling panels destroyed. And then look at the dross destroyed.
All the photos. Scott entered
the photos. Exactly. And then remember we talked about last week the theft of the film canister?
Yeah.
Every turn. I don't care where you look. At every turn, this is an outrage.
Okay, Lynn. Well, it's been so nice that you came back and did an addendum and discussed this further for people who are interested. They can find more at your website, Sirhan's Researcher.
Yes, and don't be intimidated. On a really, if people would just, it's important. Just like challenge my work, challenge it. Go ahead, look to find fault. That's all I ask for. Take a look at this. At what I present, and I support everything that I say. I'm not taking sides on this.
There's documents of everything from the National Archives. I've gone through your site, and there's pictures of everything, all the documents, all the envelopes, everything. The mislabeling.
Exactly. And just think for a minute, if I had scientific background, think for a minute what I would have discovered these things a lot earlier, but I was plowing through it painstakingly, examining every single thing. It could have been speeded up if I was trained in this. You know that?
Well, anyway,
about that.
We'll try to be the catalyst for someone to take it further.
I hope so, and that's what I like about your program, that it interests people in looking a little closer into these things. Thank you very much.
Okay, Lynn, it's been a pleasure to speak to you again. And I'll keep in touch via email with you, and we'll talk again.
Yes, you take care.
All
Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for being a guest again.
The new book, titled The War State by Michael Swanson, explains the great national transformation that took place and put the Kennedy presidency in the context of the times and reveals never-before-published information about the Cuban Missile Crisis. President Kennedy would not have been assassinated if he had been president 200 years ago. His assassination took place in the context of the Cold War and the rise of the national security state. Before World War II, the United States was a continental republic. In the decade that followed, it became an imperial superpower. Generals such as Curtis LeMay not only wanted to invade Cuba, but knew that there were short-range missiles on the island armed with nuclear warheads that they could not destroy because they were on mobile launchers. Their invasion could have led to a third world war, and they wanted to go to war anyway. The War State by Michael Swanson reveals why and will show you what President Kennedy was up against. For more information, thewarstate.com. Black Op Radio is pleased to announce a direct download section. That's right. Now you can purchase all archive shows and specialty packages such as the John Armstrong interview, Doug Horn, Jim Douglas, Jim Diogenio, and more. So instead of having to wait with regular mail, you can get shows you want in minutes directly to your computer. Check out the direct download section at blackopradio.com. Black Op Radio presents Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, the DVD Complete Collection. Finally, the DVD set you've been waiting for is available. Over 15 hours with Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. Over 15 hours. Interviews with Len Osanek, John Judge, David Ratcliffe, and more. This is a one-of-a-kind set. These interviews feature Fletcher Prouty having candid conversations regarding his 23 years in the military, but specifically 9 years in the Pentagon from 1955 to 1964. His inside knowledge is invaluable to researchers of this era of American and world history. These are the revelations you've been waiting for. Over 15 hours with Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, the complete DVD collection. Available at the Colonel Prouty reference site, www.prouty.org, and blackopradio.com. It's a political rally, a free speech zone, a town hall meeting. It's an interrogation at NSA headquarters. Now, it's time to make a statement. Time to represent. Time to let them know who you are. That's your part of the Black Op. With a brand new Black Op Radio t-shirt. Comes in all sizes. Wear it loud and proud. Join the Black Op today. www.blackopradio.com. If you believe there's more to the JFK assassination and the mystery surrounding the CIA and its covert operations, you're not alone. Meet the man Oliver Stone called X in the epic motion picture JFK. Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty comes forward with never-before-seen or heard documentation and information about JFK, the Vietnam War, the CIA, and more on a brand-new CD-ROM. The collected works of Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty is an incredible offer not to be missed. For a limited time only, find the answers surrounding these issues and more with the collected works of Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. Or visit the Colonel Prouty reference site on the World Wide Web, the collected works of Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty.